It's another edition of Time About the Movies. Today we're taking a look at the films of March 5th, 2004. Only two to look at today, but they're notable movies, especially the first one here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first film we've got here. The biggest new release of the weekend, Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson in the feature film adaptation of the classic 70s TV series, Starsky and Hutch. So yeah, this is a very interesting movie, especially considering that I was clearly too young for Starsky and Hutch, the original series, and this was my basic introduction to the series as a whole. But the premise, you can tell, is pretty much a straightforward buddy cop movie where, you know, you've got the guy who's the straight arrow, and you got the guy who's always by the book, and then you have the guy who plays by his own rules. And here, pretty much the same thing here. You've got Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson as two streetwise undercover cops in the fictional city of Bay City, California, in 1975, busting drug criminals with the help of underworld boss Huggy Bear, played pitch perfectly by Snoop Dogg. We'll get to the casting in a little bit here because it's pretty damn amazing. This is a prequel to the TV series as it portrays Starsky and Hutch first being partnered, and it's notable because it switches the personalities of the title characters. In the show, Starsky was curious and streetwise, Hutch was by the book. Meanwhile, in this film, it's Starsky who's the serious cop, and Hutch is the one who's laid back. Hutch is played by Owen Wilson, Starsky's Ben Stiller, and directed by Todd Phillips, who had done Road Trip and Old School before this, and it's his magic that makes it work in this case. A lot of his early films were really, really good, and here's another one of those examples of a film that really feels like something that could have been seen in the 1970s, honestly. I mean, this feels like a 1970s comedy. But then again, it was made in 2004. But that's the great thing about it. From the camera angles to the way that it moves around like you're watching the television show, it literally does feel like something straight out of the 70s. And I think that's one of the most impressive things about this particular movie, is that even though it does change the rules around a lot in this, it's not afraid to be over the top and ridiculous. I mean, it's fun. It feels like a fun homage to the television series, and does it more with a modern setting too. Because there's a lot of jokes in here that are very much in a modern setting. Like, you have a lot of jokes that would probably play in a modern comedy. And it's done here in a way where it doesn't feel like you're out of the decade, and at the same time, it feels like a modern-day movie at the same time. It's like a perfect meshing of the two. And just the casting overall is really damn good. Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson are great as the title characters. Vince Vaughn is great playing the bad guy in this. You see Juliette Lewis in here, Jason Bateman. Carmen Electra and Amy Smart actually have two fun roles here playing cheerleaders. The guys end up dating. There's another one, Brandy Roderick, who plays a cheerleader they're interrogating her, and it's a really funny scene. Will Ferrell has a cameo in here as well. This is kind of after his success with Elle. And Ben Stiller more I think about it, Ben Stiller had a pretty good year in 2004 because he had Along Came Polly, he had this movie, and then he would follow it up again in the summer with Dodgeball. So a big year for him in general. But the movie's just fun, and Snoop Dogg is Huggy Bear. I mean, pitch perfect casting right there. I mean, that guy just sells the role. I don't think anybody else could have played him in this particular movie. The movie knows straight up exactly what it has to do to entertain its audience, and it also appease the fans of the television show. I mean, the ending, where you have the original Starsky and Hutch, David Sewell and Paul Michael Glaser, in kind of like a passing of the torch scene, like, that's how you know the movie does a very good job of handling that situation, because, you know, when they bring in actors from the television show in general, it could feel like it's a little bit of fan service, but if it's done well, if you do it well enough, like with Ghostbusters Afterlife. What did they do with Ghostbusters Afterlife? They brought the original Ghostbusters in, and it didn't feel like fan service, but if it's done well, it feels like fan service, but if it's done really well and you completely forget that you see it as kind of nostalgic fan service, you can really appreciate all the things about that, what they managed to do there. And with Starsky and Hutch, I feel like they do the exact same thing here. Everything about the movie, it's funny, it's really well done. It can be stupid at times, it can be really clever at times. It feels like a film straight out of the 1970s, but it feels like something in a modern-day setting as well. It doesn't really get talked about all that much, man. It's a movie that was a big hit when it came out, and then just kind of faded off into obscurity as these guys eventually went on to become bigger and better names. And this was the beginning of the Frat Pack era, too. And it's just really, really funny stuff, man. I was really happy that this movie held up well over time, because it's still a friggin' funny movie, man. And definitely another one of those winners for Todd Phillips, who was really coming out of the gate strong early on with Old School, Road Trip, and then this film. But, yeah, a really, really good film that I highly recommend checking out if you haven't seen it already. It's a very good, it's a very fun, good time. I really enjoy it. Starsky and Hutch. So with that said, let's move on to the last movie we have here, and that is Viggo Mortensen, after his success with The Lord of the Rings, hoping to make another success out of his next film, and that is Hidalgo. This was directed by Joe Johnston, too. It really didn't even mention that, but this is a story about Frank Hopkins and his Mustang Hidalgo, and it recounts Hopkins racing from his horse in Arabia in 1891 against Bedouins riding pure-blood Arabian horses. The only other big name in the movie is Omar Sharif, and if Omar Sharif's the second big name in your film, you better have a damn good movie to go with it. And unfortunately, I don't think there really is enough there to carry Hidalgo as a good film. It's a movie that has a lot of ambition to it. You can see the effort being put into it with the visual effects and all. I mean, the sandstorms are pretty cool to watch. And Viggo Mortensen can be a very good actor, but I feel like this was a film that Disney was hoping for a lot more because Mortensen was just in the Lord of the Rings movies, and they probably thought, well, this guy's going to be a superstar after this last Lord of the Rings movie. We got to cash in right away, and not so much. It's not that the movie is bad or anything, it just feels kind of pointless. I mean, like I said, sometimes the visual effects can look pretty cool. Sometimes the casting overall can be decent as well, but at the same time, there's never enough there to really make this movie stand out as something more than just an interesting idea, but a botched opportunity in the end. And it's also too long, too. It's over 2.5 hours long, and it just feels like it's overstaying its welcome because it's never really doing anything that makes this significant or much different compared to other movies of its type. It's a film that has some interesting ideas overall, but just never enough to really carry the film all the way through. And Joe Johnston's trying the best he can, but sadly it's not enough to really carry the film over to something that I would say is something worth watching. I mean, a lot of possibilities there, but just botched execution overall just kind of stymies the movie to being anything spectacular. It's a miss for me on this one. It's a shame because the possibilities were there was something they could do here. If there was a much cooler story idea here, unfortunately there really isn't, and it just kind of falters in the long run. You can see why Viggo Mortensen, after this, I guess after this, he was very careful with what projects he picked because, you know, the next thing he did was a history of violence. I almost said House of Violence, a history of violence, and then he followed that up with Eastern Promises, and then he very rarely picks movies and focuses more on his artwork because, you know, I think he takes the Daniel Day-Lewis approach where he doesn't take a good script anymore unless he realizes it's a good script to work with. And I guess Hidalgo was probably the movie that probably turned him off to doing more movies after this. But then again, that's just my thinking of it. I'm just thinking that he is one of those people like Daniel Day-Lewis who really takes the time to do other things before he takes a script that he thinks will actually work to his advantage. And I think Daniel Day-Lewis also was the same thing too, because there was that break in between There Will Be Blood and Lincoln where he didn't really do a whole lot until he was given the proper script to work with here. I'm thinking maybe that's what Viggo Mortensen does as well, but then again, I could be completely wrong on that. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I think that's what he does here with this. And I think Hidalgo was the movie that made him say, okay, I got to be more careful with what I pick here. But then again, that's just my thinking. So, Hidalgo, can't really recommend it. Not a bad film, but certainly not a great one either. And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. And when we meet next time, we'll take a look at 4 more movies, including Johnny Depp and John Turturro in the thriller Secret Window, the very rushed sequel to Agent Cody Banks, Agent Cody Banks 2, Destination London, Val Kilmer in Spartan, I think David Mamet film, and also Keith Sutherland narrating NASCAR, the IMAX Experience. So we'll take a look at those 4 films all in the next episode, so be on the lookout for that. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the plays on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.